You're not going to believe why this puppy slept in the same spot at the dog park every single night. When a police officer found out the truth, he dropped to his knees and cried. Some stories don't just pull at your heart, they grab it, squeeze it, and don't let go. This is one of those stories. It starts with a lonely puppy in a quiet neighborhood dog park and ends with a secret so deeply emotional, even a hardened police officer couldn't keep it together. So grab a tissue, because once you hear what this little dog was waiting for night after night, it'll change the way you look at love, loss, and loyalty forever. Every city has its forgotten corners, those quiet, unassuming places where the hum of life dims and the world seems to pause. In one such neighborhood, nestled between aging apartment complexes and a once bustling grocery store, now echoing with emptiness, lay a modest dog park. By day, it saw the occasional jogger or an elderly couple walking their poodle. But as dusk settled, the park would empty, leaving behind only the whispers of rustling leaves and the distant murmur of traffic. It was during these twilight hours that a small, solitary figure began to appear. A puppy, no more than a few months old, with a coat of mottled brown, patches of fur missing, and eyes that held a depth of sorrow unbefitting his age. He would make his way to a specific spot beneath a sprawling oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching out like protective arms. There he would curl into a tight ball, nose tucked under his tail, and remain until the first light of dawn. At first, his presence was a mere footnote in the lives of those who noticed. Some assumed he was a stray, a product of the city's unseen alleys and backstreets. Others speculated he belonged to someone nearby and had a penchant for nighttime adventures. But as days turned into weeks, a pattern emerged. Every evening, without fail, the puppy would arrive at the park, settle beneath the oak, and stay through the night. Children returning home from late playdates would spot him and whisper among themselves, crafting tales of the ghost puppy who haunted the park. Joggers would slow their pace, casting sympathetic glances, but continuing on, earbuds drowning out any lingering concern. Dog owners, their own pets straining at leashes to investigate, would pull them along, wary of potential diseases or confrontations. The puppy became an unspoken fixture of the park, a shadow that existed on the periphery of collective consciousness. Yet, despite the myriad of eyes that observed him, no one approached, no one questioned. It was as if an invisible barrier surrounded the pup, a force field of indifference or perhaps discomfort. After all, to acknowledge him was to invite responsibility, and in a world teeming with personal battles and burdens, who had the capacity for one more? But fate has a peculiar way of intervening. Officer Mark Daniels was a man acquainted with the city's underbelly. For years on the night shift had exposed him to the gamut of urban life, from the mundane to the macabre. He prided himself on his resilience, a thick skin developed through countless encounters that demanded detachment. Yet, there were moments, rare and unexpected, that pierced through his armor. This night was destined to be one of them. The evening had been uneventful, the kind that lulled officers into a false sense of monotony. As Daniel's cruiser glided down the dimly lit street adjacent to the park, his headlights caught a glint, a brief reflection off too moist, dark eyes peering from beneath the oak tree. He slowed, curiosity piqued. Parking at the curb, he stepped out, the cool night air brushing against his face. The puppy remained motionless, only his eyes tracking the officer's approach. There was an eerie calmness to him, an absence of the typical skittishness one might expect. Daniels crouched a few feet away, adopting a non-threatening posture. "Hey there, little guy," he murmured, his voice softened by genuine concern. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The puppy's gaze held his, unblinking, as if weighing the sincerity of the man's words. Then, with a sigh that seemed too profound for such a small creature, he rested his head on his front paws, eyes still locked onto Daniel's. Something inside the officer stirred, a sensation he couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't pity, he'd felt that before. No, this was different. It was as if the puppy was communicating a story, a silent narrative of waiting, longing, and perhaps loss. Daniels reached out a tentative hand, allowing the pup to sniff his fingers. There was no recoil, no sign of fear. Emboldened, he gently ran his hand over the puppy's head, feeling the coarse texture of unkempt fur beneath his palm. "You don't have a collar," Daniels noted, more to himself than the dog. No tags, no signs of an owner. He glanced around the park, now cloaked in shadows, searching for any indication that someone might be nearby watching. But the benches sat empty, the pathways deserted. The world had shrunk to just the two of them. A thought nagged at the edges of Daniel's mind. This wasn't typical stray behavior. Most abandoned dogs exhibited signs: nervous energy, scavenging, erratic movements. But this puppy was different. He wasn't searching or wandering. He was waiting. The officer's gaze drifted to the oak tree's sturdy trunk, its bark worn smooth in places from years of contact, perhaps from children climbing or couples leaning during stolen moments. But near the base, there were subtle scratches, fresh and deliberate. Daniel's brow furrowed. He decided to test a theory. Standing, he took a few steps away from the puppy, then paused. The next night, Daniels came back. He didn't just come out of duty this time. He came out of something else, something heavier, a feeling that had followed him home, lingered while he made dinner, and stayed even as he tried to sleep. He kept seeing those eyes, that silence, that waiting. This time, he brought a small fleece blanket from the trunk of his cruiser and a can of wet dog food he'd grabbed from the gas station on his way in. Not the healthiest option, but better than nothing. He parked in the same spot and walked over, quiet as ever. And there he was, the little brown pup, already there, already curled up under the tree, as though nothing in the world had changed since the night before. The puppy looked up at the sound of footsteps, then wagged his tail once, not frantically, just a weak, slow wag. Enough to say, "You again." Daniels placed the food down gently. The pup didn't rush. He just stood, sniffed, and ate slowly, as if every bite had a memory attached. Daniels sat beside him on the grass, not too close, just enough to share the silence. "You don't look like a stray," Daniels muttered, more to himself than the dog. "You look like someone's everything." He scanned the pup's neck again. Still no collar, no tag, but there was something odd about him. He didn't have the ruggedness of a street dog. His nails weren't overgrown. His fur, though matted in places, wasn't filthy. And his eyes, they weren't the eyes of a lost dog. They were the eyes of someone looking for something, or someone. The next few nights became routine. Daniels came back after his shift, sometimes with a different kind of food, sometimes with a chew toy or a bone. The puppy was always there, always waiting, always looking toward the same gate. It struck Daniels how he never ran around, never chased squirrels, never barked at other dogs. He just sat, curled, waited. Every now and then, he'd look toward the entrance of the park, and his ears would perk, like he was sure someone was coming. But no one ever did. One evening, Daniels got there a little early and decided to hang around for a while. The sky was turning a soft pink as the sun set behind the buildings. A few joggers passed. Kids on bikes zoomed through the path. A couple with a golden retriever walked by and gave the little pup a quick glance. Their dog barked twice, pulling toward the pup with excitement, but the owners tugged him away. The pup didn't respond. He just watched them leave. And then something strange happened. A plastic grocery bag caught the wind and floated across the field like a ghost. The moment it rustled past the tree, the puppy shot up. He barked. His tail went wild. He ran 5 steps toward it, full of hope, joy, energy, and then stopped. His tail dropped. The wind died down. The bag settled against the fence. And just like that, he turned and walked back to his spot, laid down, curled up again, as if nothing had happened. Daniels felt his throat tighten. There was something heartbreaking in how quickly hope had turned to disappointment. Something human. That moment stuck with him the rest of the night. It gnawed at him. That sudden burst of life. The way the pup had wanted it to be someone, anyone. The way he believed. Just for a second, Daniel started asking around. He showed the pup's photo to store owners near the park. No one recognized him. One lady at a sandwich shop thought she'd seen him a few days back, but wasn't sure. The others hadn't noticed anything unusual. He knocked on a few apartment doors. No leads. No one had reported a missing dog that matched the description. Animal shelters had nothing. Animal control hadn't picked him up. It was like the pup had appeared out of nowhere, and now he refused to leave. Daniels wasn't the type to let things go. He'd seen what people were capable of, abandoning animals, neglecting them. He'd picked up strays from parking lots and pulled dogs out of storm drains. But this felt different. This dog wasn't just lost. He was anchored. So Daniels took a photo of the pup lying under the tree, tail curled against his body, eyes staring toward the gate, and started calling vet clinics. Most said no. A few asked for more pictures. Then, on the third call, something shifted. The receptionist at a small clinic on the other side of town said, "That looks like Murphy." Murphy. Daniels didn't know why, but the name hit like a spark. Something clicked. "Do you have a file?" he asked. They did. Murphy was a 2-year-old mixed breed, part retriever, part shepherd. He belonged to a man named Ryan Holt, lived just a few blocks away from the park. According to the vet records, Ryan had brought Murphy in for checkups regularly. Vaccinated, microchipped, healthy, loved. Any idea where Ryan is now? Daniels asked. There was a pause. He passed away, the receptionist said gently. About 2 weeks ago. Daniels went silent. The pieces were clicking, slowly, painfully. Ryan had been walking home from work when he was hit by a car in a hit and run. No witnesses, no suspect, just tire marks and broken glass. And Murphy? He'd been with him. In the chaos, the dog had run. People assumed he got picked up or wandered off. But apparently, he knew exactly where he needed to go. Back to the park. The same park where, according to Ryan's neighbor, they used to go every evening. Murphy would chase sticks, roll in the grass, and curl up next to Ryan on that exact patch of grass under the tree. That's where they were happy. That's where they laughed. That's where Murphy last saw his person alive. And that's where he waited, day after day, night after night, waiting. Daniel sat in his cruiser that night with the engine off, staring at the blinking cursor on his in-car computer screen. He had the details now, the records, the name, the story. But what could he do with them? He turned his gaze toward the park, where Murphy lay once again, curled up, still, watching. He wasn't surviving. He was hoping. Daniel started spending more time with him, not just visits with food, but real time, talking to him, reading case files beside him, sitting on the grass with coffee as Murphy rested his head on his knee. He even started calling him by his name. Hey, Murph. The first time he said it, the dog's ears perked up. Yeah, you like that, huh? Daniel smiled. A small thing, but real. He reached out and scratched behind Murphy's ears. The pup didn't flinch, didn't pull away. From that night on, Murphy didn't wait alone. But even with Daniel's company, Murphy never stopped watching that gate. Every night, like clockwork, his eyes locked on the same spot. Ears up, tail twitching, waiting for someone who would never return. Daniels felt helpless. The dog didn't need food or shelter. He needed closure. But how do you give that to a heart that doesn't understand death? How do you tell a soul that their person isn't coming back? He thought about adopting Murphy, bringing him home, giving him a new routine, a new start. But every time he tried to coax Murphy toward his cruiser, the pup froze. He wouldn't go, wouldn't cross the invisible line between the grass and the pavement, as if leaving the park meant giving up. And he wasn't ready for that. Neither was Daniels. So he kept coming, kept sitting, kept being there. And then something happened that changed everything. Daniel sat in his cruiser that night, engine off, park lights casting long shadows across the trees. His grip on the steering wheel was so tight his knuckles looked pale, drained. The dashboard clock ticked on. Midnight. Quiet. Too quiet. But inside Daniels, chaos. He wasn't just dealing with another sad case. This wasn't a lost dog or a routine welfare call. This was a living heartbreak, a breathing tragedy, a soul too loyal for its own good. He reached to the passenger seat and grabbed the thin manila folder he'd placed there earlier. Murphy's file, vet records, vaccine dates, appointment notes scribbled in ink, tidy handwriting, a couple of clipped receipts for treats and chew toys, and a printed copy of an obituary. Ryan Holt, 33 years old, graphic designer, son, dog owner, beloved friend, survived by no immediate family. The lines blurred after that. Daniels blinked and looked away. He didn't want this to be real. He didn't want to carry this grief. It wasn't his, but it was. Somehow it was. He'd watched this dog sleep every night under the same tree. His body curled so tightly it looked like he was trying to fold himself into the past. He saw the way Murphy's ears twitched every time the gate creaked open, hoping, pleading, for a face that never came. Daniels had spent years surrounded by tragedy, deaths, abuse cases, abandoned kids, forgotten old men. But this hurt different, because this was love in its purest, rawest form, and love refused to leave. He looked down at the tennis ball on the seat beside the file, bright green, fresh out of the can, the kind Ryan probably used to toss across the park, while Murphy sprinted like lightning through the grass. That stupid little ball was heavy somehow, like it carried memory, ghosts. Wait, Daniels grabbed it, pushed the door open, and stepped into the chill night air. He walked slowly across the empty lot, his boots crunching over gravel. As he crossed the park's iron gate, he could see him, Murphy, already there, already waiting, curled under the tree, head resting on his paws, just like always. The moment Daniels got close, Murphy's ears lifted, his eyes met his. But this time, Daniels didn't sit beside him. He dropped to his knees and wept. There were no words, no heroic speeches, just soft, stifled sobs from a man who had held back tears for years. Tears that had never fallen for the victims on his shift, for the neglected cases in his files, for the crime scenes he'd zipped past like ghosts. But here, beside this dog, he broke. His voice cracked, low and gravelly. "I'm so sorry, buddy." Murphy just watched him, still, silent. Daniels reached into his coat, pulled out the obituary, and laid it gently in the grass. It fluttered a little in the wind before settling. "He's not coming back," Daniels whispered. Murphy didn't whimper, didn't bark. He just listened. And somehow, Daniels knew he understood. Maybe not the words, but the tone, the pain. Daniels pulled the tennis ball from his pocket, rolled it in his palm. "He used to throw these for you, didn't he?" Murphy didn't move. Daniels held it out. "Come with me." The wind rustled the trees above them. A leaf spiraled down, landed on Murphy's back. The pup blinked, looked at the ball, then up at Daniels. For a long second, the world was still. Then slowly he stood up. His legs shook slightly, stiff from lying too long in the cold. He took one step forward, then another. Then he pressed his head gently against Daniels' chest. It was such a small gesture, but it undid something deep inside Daniels. It was trust, acceptance, a whisper of surrender. "I got you," Daniels murmured, wrapping his arms around him. "I promise, Murph. I got you now." That night wasn't about rescue. It was about release. The release of waiting, the release of grief, the release of hope that had turned into pain. Murphy didn't run to the cruiser. He didn't jump around. He simply walked beside Daniels as they left the park, not looking back, not rushing forward, just moving, together. When Daniels opened the door to his cruiser, Murphy hesitated for just a second, then hopped in. Saturday, looked out the window, and rested his head on the dashboard. Daniels didn't speak the entire drive. He didn't need to. He just let the silence wrap around them like a blanket. As they pulled up to his house, Daniels looked over. Murphy was asleep, peacefully, for the first time in weeks. The next few days were quiet. Murphy didn't bark, didn't eat much. He moved slowly, gently, like he was walking through dreams. Daniels gave him space, let him explore the house, left the back door open so he could sit outside if he wanted. The first time Murphy lay down by the kitchen window, Daniels sat beside him, holding that same tennis ball. "I'm not Ryan," he whispered, "but I'll do right by you." Murphy blinked and nuzzled his hand, and then, slowly, day by day, he began to come back to life. He started eating again, started wagging that little tail when Daniels came home from work, started following him from room to room, always a step behind. Daniels bought him a bed, but most nights, Murphy slept at the foot of his. Sometimes Daniels would wake up in the middle of the night and hear it, the soft thump of a tail against the wood floor. Not wild, just present. "I'm here." That's what it meant. I'm still here. But the most powerful moment came a week later. It was sunny, brisk. Daniels took Murphy back to the park, not to the tree, to the open grass. He held the tennis ball in one hand. Murphy watched him. Then Daniels tossed it, not far, just a short, gentle throw. The ball bounced twice, rolled to a stop. Murphy stared at it. Daniels didn't say a word. He waited as Murphy walked forward, sniffed the ball, paused, and then, finally, picked it up and brought it back. Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes, not because the dog retrieved a ball, but because it meant something else. Murphy wasn't just surviving anymore. He was healing. That night, as they returned home, Murphy curled up on the rug beside the fireplace. Daniel sat on the couch, watching the flames dance, the soft snores of a dog who had finally laid his grief down. He thought about Ryan, about how much he must have loved this dog, and how, in some way, Murphy had taught him more about love than anyone ever had. Love that waited, love that hurt, love that held on, and finally, love that let go. Murphy never returned to that park alone again, not once. The very next morning after that night under the stars, and under Daniel's tear-soaked hands, something shifted, not just in Murphy, but in the world around him, as though life itself had acknowledged his pain, and finally decided to let light back in. Daniel signed the adoption papers 3 days later. It wasn't some grand ceremony, no balloons, no welcome home banners, just a simple form, a quiet signature, and one last note scribbled at the bottom by the shelter manager, who'd seen countless animals come and go. This one waited longer than most. Make it count. Daniels kept that note tucked in the same folder as Ryan's obituary, because he knew he wasn't just bringing home a dog. He was bringing home a legacy. He drove straight from the shelter to a small pet shop off 7th Street. Got a new collar, navy blue, sturdy, with a silver tag that simply read, "Murphy loved, always." He picked out a bed too, something soft and plush, not too fancy, but big enough for Murphy to stretch out in, when he felt safe enough to sleep like he used to, and treats, more than he needed, because Daniels had no idea what Murphy liked best, but he wanted to find out. That night, Murphy explored the house, like a guest trying not to intrude. He sniffed the corners, peeked under the table, looked at every door twice before lying down near the front window. Daniels didn't call him over, didn't coax him with snacks. He just sat on the floor with him, a respectful silence between them, broken only by the occasional sound of a tail tapping against wood. It wasn't until midnight that Murphy got up, walked over, and quietly laid his head on Daniel's foot. And just like that, home wasn't a place anymore. It was a person. Days turned to weeks, weeks turned to months, and life, somehow, settled into something that resembled peace. Daniels wasn't used to it at first. Peace felt foreign, like something borrowed, like it might be taken back. But Murphy taught him otherwise. They developed a routine. Morning walks before sunrise, breakfast together. Daniels would read the newspaper, while Murphy laid his head across his lap, eyes half shut, content just to exist near someone again. Evenings were quiet too. Sometimes they'd visit the park, not for fetch, not yet, just to sit under the same old oak tree. That sacred ground, the place where grief once lived and waited. Daniels would lean back, hands behind his head, and let the breeze rustle the leaves while Murphy rested beside him, eyes scanning the horizon, not for Ryan anymore, but for what was present, here, now. Some wounds, Daniels had come to realize, didn't need to vanish. They weren't infections to be cured. They were reminders, etchings, tattoos of the soul. And Murphy's grief, though deep, had softened. He still woke up some nights, whimpering softly in his sleep. Daniels never woke him. He just sat on the floor nearby, keeping vigil until the tremors stopped. Love, he realized, wasn't about fixing everything. It was about staying even when the brokenness lingered, staying when no one else would. There were small moments too, moments only someone watching closely could recognize, like how Murphy still stared out the window at the same time every evening, as if Ryan might walk up the front steps one day, like how he perked up whenever he heard the sound of car doors closing nearby. Daniels never corrected him. He never said, "He's not coming." Instead, he sat beside him. Sometimes silence is louder than any truth. And Murphy, with time, stopped waiting for the impossible. He started living for what was. One spring afternoon, Daniels was cleaning out his garage when he came across an old box labeled Kids. It belonged to his brother's family, who'd moved across the country years ago. Inside were old soccer balls, plastic toys, a worn-out baseball mitt, and at the bottom, a dusty rope tug toy, chewed at both ends. He dusted it off, looked at it for a second, then walked inside. Murphy was lounging on the living room floor, paws stretched, one ear flopped lazily to the side. Daniels dropped the toy beside him and said softly, "No pressure, champ." Murphy sniffed it, looked at Daniels. Then, without warning, he gave it one playful tug. Daniels laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. Murphy's tail thumped so hard it knocked a shoe across the room. That night, they played again. Not just tug of war, but something deeper. It was a game of trust, of return, of reclaiming the parts of life grief had stolen. The park visits became more frequent, and every time, Daniels would pack a bag, water bottle, Murphy's favorite treats, and always, that same tennis ball. Sometimes he'd toss it, sometimes Murphy would chase it, sometimes not, but that wasn't the point. It wasn't about how far Murphy could run, it was about how far he'd come. Other dog owners began to recognize them. They'd smile, wave, ask about Murphy. "He's doing good," Daniels would say, rubbing Murphy's ears. "Took him a while to get here, but he's here now." Kids would come up to pet him. Murphy, once wary, now welcomed them, licked their hands, wagged his tail. Daniels watched it all, with a quiet sort of pride. This wasn't just a dog healing. This was a soul-reclaiming joy. One evening, a woman approached them at the park. She looked to be in her late 20s, carrying a leash in one hand and a scrapbook in the other. "Is this Murphy?" she asked. Daniels nodded. Her eyes welled up. She opened the scrapbook to a photo. It was Ryan, with Murphy as a puppy, taken right there in that same park. "I'm his cousin," she whispered. "Ryan, I didn't know what happened to Murph. Thank you for not giving up on him." Daniels didn't say much. He just nodded and patted Murphy's side. Murphy leaned into him. That night, Daniels sat in the dark with the scrapbook open in his lap. He flipped through every page, watched the years pass in photos, summers and birthdays and snowy walks. Murphy always by Ryan's side. Daniels looked down at the dog, now snoring softly at his feet. "You lived so many lives already, didn't you?" he murmured. "I'm just here for this chapter." Murphy stirred, crawled onto the couch beside him, and rested his head in Daniel's lap. It felt like a thank you, not a goodbye, but a beginning. Time passed. Murphy grew slower. White began to appear around his muzzle. He didn't run as much, didn't bark at squirrels, spent most afternoons dozing in patches of sunlight on the porch. But Daniels never left him behind. He made ramps for the stairs, switched to softer food, talked to him like he was still that lost pup in the rain. And through it all, the bond between them deepened, not out of necessity, but out of something far greater: respect, understanding, love that didn't try to replace what was lost, but honored it by showing up every single day. One morning, Daniels woke up to find Murphy sitting by the door, leash in his mouth. It was rare by then, but Daniels smiled. "You want to go?" Murphy wagged his tail, slow and steady. They went to the park, to the tree. Daniels sat down, leaning against the bark. Murphy curled beside him, head in his lap. They stayed like that for hours. No ball, no words, just presence. As the sun began to dip, Daniels whispered, "Thank you for waiting, buddy." Murphy didn't move, didn't need to, because sometimes love doesn't end when someone's gone. Sometimes it waits, in the cold, under an old oak tree, until someone finally understands. And when they do, it doesn't fade, it blooms. Subscribe for more real stories that'll touch your heart.